Welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's Tim Wade.
And my name is Joe Augustin. You may recognize these three people the same screen for, I haven't been together for quite a long time. This is the No Show, and welcome to the once every fortnight Friday show where we try to shine a light on things that you perhaps didn't catch in the regular news updates.
Yeah, and it's good to have Tim back. And we've got a special guest today. Do you want to introduce him, Joe?
Yeah, we do have a very special guest. He is known to some as passionate, charming, and someone who speaks really from the heart. He's been known as the compassioneer, the mystic of compassion. I feel I haven't got enough incense in the room right now to sort of do the rest of the introduction. But if you would, please welcome to the show today a man obviously known for his communication skills. Ladies and gentlemen, Rohit Bassi.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
That's it.
And the purple in the background is for you.
Thank you.
The color of spirituality.
So I've looked ahead at today's schedule. This is one of those shows I call a very, very big show. So many things to talk about, and as you mentioned in all the socials about this, everything seems to be boiling over. It is really one of those special fortnights. So much has happened in the past 2 weeks. I think we should get down to it as quickly as possible before Tim breaks something on camera.
I've broken my microphone.
But I think we need to give Rohit a chance to introduce himself.
Sure, Rohit. Sorry. Please go ahead. Take a few moments to tell the world what you are, what you're really known for, besides what I maybe have misunderstood.
Now, I'm born and brought up in the UK. Origins are obviously Indian. I'm based here in Dubai. I think it's been now 16 or 17 years being here in Dubai. From a professional perspective, speaker, trainer, and coach, focusing mainly on communication. So communication it comes in everything: leadership, sales, conflict resolution, you name it. Everything involves communication. But more looking at it from a perspective of mindful communication, what's really happening with you, and in every moment, how do you communicate? I say that for a simple reason is because my mother used to always say I've got a very bad temper, and my temper does not help me out when I'm conversing with people. So that was kind of the first stage for me to think about how do I communicate with people. And when I'm talking about communication, is like the verbal communication. When it comes to written communication, I'm not really the right person to come to. But when it comes to more of the verbal communication and what's happening within yourself, which starts reflecting outside, that's what I focus on. And that's one of the reasons clients just call me the communication wizard. Which I'll tell you one thing that was very uncomfortable with it until I looked at the word wizard. It actually means someone who has no natural ability of magic. That person has to learn it through the rough and tough and experience to be a magician. So I was like, okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay. I just know it as that irritating thing that happens every time you try to launch something new on Microsoft.
I'm not that one.
I imagine that for someone who's a communications person, especially mindful communication, that the world today must be the gap between your expertise and what the ideal world is must be getting wider and wider and wider, and either frustrates you greatly or must press some entrepreneurial buttons that say, "Oh, what an opportunity this is."
Yeah.
It does frustrate me, and then I have to remind myself, peace begins with me. And that just helps me say, okay, I can't
basically what I'm hearing is
on.
Don't make Rohit angry because he'll turn green. Smash things.
Maybe.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll get stuck into the news. So, as Joe said, the original sort of news clips that I shared amongst us were extensive, and I had to remove quite a lot. And actually, it's not 2 weeks of news, Joe. This is principally in the last week. There's just so much going on in the world at the moment, and as someone like me who spends a lot of time trying to keep up with everything, I'm struggling to keep up. So I figure if I'm struggling, most people will it'll just be beyond them. So I'm going to couple of quick takes. So I'm going to start with the US. There's some interesting stuff going on over there. So the first is we started this week off with obviously the tornado in Mississippi that killed 26 people. And this is a sort of extreme weather event that will become more normal and more extreme as the earth warms. And then, of course, the other thing that happened was another mass shooting with 3 9-year-olds and 3 60-plus-year-olds dying. You know, the rest of the world continues to be baffled by this. It's the answer is obvious. Guns are now the biggest killer of children in the United States, above all other things. And, you know, they banned Kinder eggs because they had pieces of plastic in them. So the idea that they can't do something about automatic weapons, and, you know, some of the social media commentary, you know, coaches, football stars crying, saying, when are we going to do something about it, is pretty extensive. But the real outrage in America, the statue of David, because apparently it's pornography. One of the parents said it was disgusting, and I'm emphasizing the word disgusting. And, you know, I kind of thought, well, you know, it's small, but, you know, there's nothing wrong with the human form, right? I was wondering who would giggle at that. Anyway, moving across to Europe, Italy is waging a war on lab-grown food because they want to protect the tradition of their food, which obviously makes sense. But there was another piece that was highlighting that we need to produce 70% more food by 2050. So essentially, we need lab-grown food because we literally do not have enough land for animal agriculture to increase by 70%. And then another really, really interesting lab-grown food story was the DNA from an extinct mammoth has been used to create a giant meatball, which is in a museum in Amsterdam. So whether you like it or not, cell-based meats are coming. We desperately need them. In the Weekend Reads, there's a really good piece by George Monbiot talking about how basically animal agriculture is the greatest threat to human survival. And he really makes the case in a positive way. Don't think I could eat mammoth meatballs, but there you go. So there's the quick ones before I go to a long one.
The one thing that got me about it was, I mean, it's a mammoth meatball, but it doesn't have to be this size. I mean, you can make mammoth meatballs a little more small, I suppose, but it wouldn't make the same point.
It's literally, it's this big.
Yeah.
And imagine that at IKEA.
When I saw that news, I thought it was a fake hoax news. I just ignored it completely.
Right.
It's so good. I love it. I love it. This is basically a Jurassic bite.
Yeah. There were a lot of people saying we make them extinct and then we eat them, and I was like, I don't think humans can be blamed for the mammoth extinction. So, you know, but anyway, all right. So the IPCC report came out, and it's been generating a massive amount of conversation. I'm sure everywhere you go on social media, you're hearing people talk about it. However, it's still not in the mainstream media, or it's certainly not front page, and politicians have basically been deadly silent on it. But there's a really interesting research piece by Nature. Nature's great. If you're interested in what's going on in the environment, their research is awesome. And it's basically stating that if we want to get on top of climate change, one of the most important things we can do is protect existing populations of wild animals. And if you remember, wild animals only make up 4% of all mammals on Earth. So this is something we can do because they restore their natural habitats, improving the natural capture of carbon dioxide within ecosystems. And, you know, so if we introduce things like sea otters, grey wolves, or even include whales in this, they could lead to the capture of 6.41 gigatons of CO2 annually, which is 95% of the amount needed to be removed annually to ensure global warming remains below 1.5 degrees. Now, I think 1.5 is well and truly gone. I think 2 is actually gone, but you know, if we've got these opportunities, so it's a concept which is called trophic rewilding, and 15 international experts went out and had a look in savannas, forests, and other ecosystems where the wildlife populations were healthy versus when they weren't. They found multiple cases in which thriving populations of certain species, particularly large vertebrates, and we were talking about elephants last year, they basically prove that if you have large elephant populations, it's good for the ecosystem. But basically through acts like foraging, burrowing, and trampling, increased an ecosystem's carbon storage capacity by as much as 250%. So I reckon that's an idea that we've got to get on top of. But obviously, one of the things that we've got to do is reduce animal agriculture to create more space for wild animals to grow and flourish again. So seems like a good idea that we can all get behind, don't you think?
I think it's the animals are kind of showing you the way that what can actually happen if farming was done responsibly. If all that tilling of land and moving and stuff. Because I was thinking about something like, how could you have more animals and that would help carbon capture? And then when you think about how it actually propels the rest of the ecosystem, then it makes a lot more sense, right? So yeah, it's not necessarily having a smaller population; it's having a less impactful population, a negatively impactful population. Speaking of negative impacts, the insurance companies of the world are having a big look at their lives because of how the global the climate's going. You see, the insurance business basically is a business that's based on making promises about things if they go wrong. But they're made based on old data, old information. And what's happened is, weather has changed so much that what used to be a once in 100 years thing is happening, like twice or three times in the last 50 years or 20 years. So that's really changed some of the way things, some of these things turn out. So floods are becoming more damaging. They're bigger and more extensive. Fires, of course, and insurance is that promise that if something bad happens, we'll pay up for it. Now, what's kind of good about the business is that they've made so much profits and they have so much buffer in the past that they probably have some room before they'll run out of cash. But I think they're facing a real problem as well. They definitely can't continue based on what they have currently. The data is changing too quickly. Things, all the tables that they're using, which are actuarial tables, they're completely irrelevant. They're not representative of what the world is today. So they have to reassess how risk is born. Just a slight adjacent thing is in the world of longevity as well, because longevity is becoming what it is. They're having trouble there as well. So insurance, while being one of the most profitable businesses that ever were, you may want to relook how you look at their viability. But for the most part, I think they will continue if they readjust what they do. Insurance is really some of the best organized. I think in terms of, if you look at the world and you think about whether there's gambling allowed in your country, the biggest casino of all actually is insurance, where the business itself bets against you, and most times they win.
So what sort of time frame are you looking at for the collapse of the insurance industry?
Well,
because it's going to come, right?
It doesn't say expert under my name, but I will say that the industry is renowned for changing the way it looks at itself. So it is actually quite a transformative business. It does figure out how to move forward. It identifies problem and then it moves forward and changes stuff. So things that have changed the insurance industry or should have changed the industry drastically have been taken on board, and the insurance industry has done things with it which people didn't quite naturally think, like for instance DNA testing, which most people thought would be something that the insurance business would not like to have or not be involved with. Insurance companies have realized from a business perspective it's actually better to have people test and find out if they're at risk of disease, and so avert those otherwise more expensive costs down the road. So it's kind of become inverted, where insurance companies sometimes, being profit driven, actually will look out for us because it's better for the bottom line.
Speaking of bottom line, colonoscopies seem to be something that insurance companies do advocate, because colon cancer is the most preventable. And if men and women over the age of 50 or 45, depending on what country you're in, go and get tested every few years, they can just remove any sort of polyp and do that. And insurance companies are paying for that. Here in Singapore, for example, they're paying for that, for you to go and get that, rather than having to do a big payout for cancer later. And it's like $7,500 to go and do it. So, yeah.
Speaking of rear ends, Tim, you got an update on Donald Trump?
Yeah. Let me just go incognito for this one. So, Donald Trump was back on the rally trail. this time in, curiously enough, Waco, Texas. The venue was curious, and a number of media outlets and Trump critics had questioned why the former president was holding his first mega rally of the 2024 campaign in Waco, where 30 years earlier, federal and state authorities engaged in an armed standoff with the Branch Davidian religious cult that ended in the death of 86 people. I remember those scenes of everything up in flames.
Yeah.
It was just crazy. And so Waco helped fuel an anti-government movement in the US, as terms like Nugent's jackbooted thugs were frequently used to describe federal law officers. So this one, I mean, Trump's just been indicted in New York, right? So for paying off the porn star.
But it's actually more than paying off the porn star. It's an interesting story. If you have an opportunity to dig into it, there's a lot more depth and potential felony charges than just that. But the Waco thing, that was the moment that changed my life and made me look at the news in different ways, because we had a consistent media stream around the world about the story and one perspective, and then alternative views in sort of other magazines that were hard to come by started sort of coming up with another idea. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe the story I'm hearing isn't the right story, and maybe there's more to it. And that's what made me sort of get really critical about the news. So I thought that was an interesting one. But yeah, Donald Trump, what's going on at the moment? Couldn't happen to a nicer fella.
One colonoscopy after another. An even scarier story, though. I know it's hard to believe that there's a scarier one with Trump trying to be president again, but this one is pretty full on. This is about the Greenland ice sheet, and it is closing in on passing that melting point of no return. So just to put in perspective, the Greenland ice sheet covers 1.7 million square kilometers. That's like 660,000 square miles in the Arctic. And if it melts entirely, global sea levels would rise. Usually when we're talking about global sea levels rising, we're talking about like 0.5 meter, 1 meter, maybe 2 meters, and everyone's like freaking out. But if this thing melts entirely, global sea levels would rise about 7 meters, which is like 23 feet. So you better be living on a hill. But scientists aren't sure how quickly the ice sheet could melt. So modeling, and we know that whenever they do modeling, things seem to be getting faster and faster than the model. But modeling tipping points, which are critical thresholds where a system behavior irreversibly changes, helps researchers find out when that melt might occur. And based in part on carbon emissions, a new study using simulations identified 2 tipping points for the Greenland ice sheet. One of them, releasing 1,000 gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere, will cause the southern portion of that ice sheet to melt, and releasing 2,500 gigatons of carbon means a permanent loss to nearly the entire ice sheet, hence the 7 meters of sea level rising. So far, we've admitted 500 gigatons of carbon. So that's half of the first tipping point of 1,000, which is pretty damn scary, really. And I guess the frustration, one of the reasons why we do this show, the frustration is things aren't happening fast enough. And decision makers aren't making critical decisions fast enough. We know that they can. Global pandemic showed it. We know that they can. It's just, at the moment, there's a lot of politicking, a lot of lobbying, a lot of money changing hands that's stopping action happening. And this is the scary part, I think.
Yeah. I also think think there's a lot of responsibility with us to, keeping fossil fuels in the ground. Great. We use them not just for petrol, driving our cars. It's for growing our food. I mean, it's so extensive. It's everywhere, and we have to also accept that this is what we need to do to change, and we're not voting for that yet. So it's like, I hear everyone going, oh, it's fossil fuel companies, they're evil. And I'm like, well, you're still driving, you're still buying clothes full of plastic, you're still, eating the food that's grown because of fossil fuels. It's a big interconnected web. And I think the global responsibility, especially of the wealthy top 10%, You know, we need to start understanding what it means to us and be prepared for what comes with that change.
I think at a consumer level, the problem is misinformation. I think at the political level and the industrial level, the problem is lobbying and power. And at our level, so at the consumer level, it's misinformation, because even today in this show, we've talked about Italy saying, let's protect our own farms. Let's not do lab-based farming, but at the same time, we need more food by 2050. And then we want to take up possible farmland and give it back to animals because we need to repopulate the wild. And so then people are like, well, hang on, all these things are conflicting. We don't have a plan to put it together. I'm going to do nothing. I don't know who to believe anymore. Whereas, you know, and then the other thing is, if you do some research on plankton absorbing about 75% of carbon, the sea being a huge carbon, then if we have lots of whales, they're going to eat the plankton. so it's like, all right, so, you know, what, I don't know what to do. And we all get paralyzed with this conflicting information because we don't want to look like fools for following the wrong thing. So I think, so yes, we are responsible, but, you know, the drive in EV, for example, I'm doing one of my rants. Joe, just start doing this and going, caca, once I've gone past my 3-hour mark.
Caca.
But the EV one, for example, the stuff I'm you know, people are going, you know, go and get your EV, and they go, well, yeah, but to produce the battery, we had to mine for this, and this, and we had to destroy all that sort of stuff, and this huge tractor takes up more, you know, to dig it all up, takes up, you know, 3,000 cars worth of stuff in a day, and or whatever the information is. So again, we're being bombarded by trying to do the right thing, but then being told it's wrong, and then we go, well, I'm just going to do what I've always been doing, and nothing changes. And so, and where's that misinformation coming from? The same people vying for power.
Yeah. The essence of the message is reduce your impact on Earth personally, and you'll already, and we get 1 billion people doing that, we might have a chance.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
I'm wearing a plastic shirt, but it is recycled from bottles taken from the ocean, I believe.
Right.
And you're not showing.
Well, that's what I've been told, but I have to apologize for all the sea life that we're living in those bottles. What did you say, Rohit?
I said, and you're not showing us your shirt.
Yeah, no, this one's a terrible one. The bottles are still branded.
Rohit?
Yeah. So I mean, listening to all of you, one of the word which, and Andrea and I were talking about this just offline, interdependent. We're all interdependent on each other. And you look at the fact that if we keep on focusing on the fact that we're independent, this is, you know, we have our freedom. I'm not denying that there is a sense of freedom and there's a sense of independence, but we are all interdependent on each other. And if one of us misses the link, it starts having a domino effect on every single person. It's like the butterfly effect. And the more we can get educated on this thing of being interdependent, there could be greater harmony happening with all of us. I mean, when we talk about the planet, one of the first things which comes to my mind is George Carlin's famous talk about, it's not about saving the planet, it's about saving the human race.
Yep.
And he talks about kill all the humans and you'll see how the planet will just thrive. Yeah? So that's one thing which keeps on playing into my mind. So one of the things which has come up in the news is about Boris Johnson. It was last Wednesday.
The link
from
my kill all the humans
place where I was. He's the one who was responsible for the Brexit. So painful for many people as they can see it now, whoever's based back in the UK. So the first thing was he would be vindicted during a television appearance before the Commons Privilege Committee. And he was grilled about his claims he misled Parliament over parties inside Downing Street during the COVID period. So that was quite interesting. The second thing was he started a rebellion against the current Prime Minister, Sunak. And it did not work in his favor. Literally, it did not work in his favor. One of the Tory MPs, he literally said that it's over for Boris, and that it's Rishi's moment. The Conservative Party just needs to move on. I find British politics very strange, even when I was back in the UK, being born and bred over there, and I still find it very, very strange. What happens with that place in terms of how the government runs the whole system. It's quite amazing for a country which was, had the saying of the sun never falls on the empire. What's happening with that country is really
implosive.
Yeah. I was shocked a couple of weeks ago when I heard that there were rations being done in the UK, and I was like, what? I actually called a couple of my friends. They said, we've not been affected, but there's certain parts in the UK who have been affected by this. In fact, only this week I saw, or was it this week or last week, something on LinkedIn, tomatoes not being available.
Oh, that's because they've all been thrown at the government.
Yeah, I think one of the big news headlines, economically speaking, that the two countries expected to do worst in this current climate, Russia and the UK. And, oops, that sounds like a... Is everyone hearing this?
Yeah, I'm hearing it.
Okay.
It's the space octopus.
No, I think Russia and the UK. I mean, basically, and the UK is possibly going to outdo Russia to the bottom of that list. So it's really remarkable. The other thing I was actually thinking about when you mentioned that thing about how it's over for Boris Johnson, I think this is the third time it's been declared that it's been over for him, but he keeps finding new depths. So we'll see.
he appears. He reappears somehow or the other. Yeah. Another thing which is happening is octopus farming. That seems to be a thing which is a painful thing to happen. And strangely, when I saw that, when I was told about this, and I was on my Instagram and I saw someone eating an octopus, a live octopus. I was like, what's going on over here? So that's actually quite scary, and somehow that needs to be brought up into people's attention about what's happening about the octopus farming.
Yeah, because they did claim, I think the UK said that they were sentient beings.
Yes.
I think that was just last year, right? So we've gone from that to this, it's like we don't really get it. So some other big news that happened this week is the long-feared population bomb may never go off, and we are expected to peak sooner than we think, and then we're going to go down. So basically, we're probably going to get to about 8.8 billion people. There's also some other stories circulating at the moment where worldwide sperm count has been declining at a rapid rate as well. So that's certainly going to help things. Now, the good thing about the population bomb not going off, of course, is it's good for the environment, but lower birth rates aren't going to solve this, because it's about overconsumption, and it's the wealthy minorities that are doing that. But so they did a report which incorporated some other aspects like social and economic factors, and some of the biggest things that we can do, which we've been talking about for years, is educate girls. Educated girls have fewer children, they work more, they take care of the community more. So that's one, as well as improving income levels. Just moving back to the environment for a bit, because this is probably something I've been keeping an eye on pretty closely for a while now. We are moving towards El Nino, and when it actually starts, it's still up in the air. And I've seen people saying we're going to have no El Nino to a super El Nino, and most of the scientists that I'm following are saying it's looking on track for a super El Nino. And we know that it starts when the Pacific Ocean warms by 3 degrees Celsius. So they're basically warning that this year's El Nino cycle could bring unimaginable heat. And if you think of what India is facing right now, and it's going to get worse in the coming months, this time next year it will be even more extreme. So we've been in a La Nina, a cooling event, for 3 years, which is unusual. But within that cooling period, 2022 was still the 5th hottest year. So I just wanted to bring this one up. So to say to everyone, wherever you live, understand what El Nino means to you, what a super El Nino means to you. Look at the predictions of the sort of temperatures that you're going to face, and then really start to think about what you need to do to get prepared for that. Like, so in places like India, there's going to be electricity shortages, so people won't be able to cool their homes, right? So it's going to be pretty severe. But what do you need to do? So don't get sideswiped by it. It's coming. The forest fires or the grass fires that are expected in Australia at the end of this year are just going to be catastrophic. So get ready, get prepared. Don't ignore it. Joe?
Well, I'll tell you what, the storm that no one's ignoring right now is the AI storm. And I'll, I think what's very interesting about it is I think of the environment, the problem with the environment, pretty much like the problem with AI. And the way that we're responding to it right now is very interesting. It's because the threat is now clear and imminent. People are behaving and responding differently. But there are two sides to the coin, though. There is one that's talking about, how we're fascinated, we're horrified, we feel awesome as well when we interact with AI and we go like, wow, this is amazing. It's such intelligence. And the topic that the article that you shared with me was about we're failing the mirror test. So the mirror test basically is when you put a mirror up to an animal, whether the animal's able to distinguish that it's a separate being or it's itself that it's seeing in the mirror. And what the article basically says is that because AI as we know it, most of the AI that we know right now, which is chat AI, is actually derived from the words of other people. What we're actually reacting to is we're looking into a mirror, seeing ourselves and going like, wow, that mirror is really intelligent. So that's one aspect of it. But there is another aspect of it that is worrying a lot of people. And you probably heard about this big open letter that's been signed by, amongst many people, Steve Wozniak, who I'm actually, I hold in higher regard than the other guy famously on that, which is Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And actually, if he was alive today, I'm sure what's his name, Stephen Hawking would have added his name to this list as well, because he also famously warned against AI. And the idea is that AI, as it develops, is one of those things where we can't control how fast it develops when it skips on to the next level. And right now, it's jumping levels and levels and levels, moving really quickly. And for those who say that it's as simple as maybe when we need to finally shutting it off, I want to combine all the stories you've heard today and give you one unified conspiracy theory. How about that? Think about the mammoth DNA story. Think about how we're trying to solve the meat problem, trying to solve different things where we as human beings are having difficulty with solving those issues. Think then about an AI that is able, first of all, to solve the animal problem. It's able to create animals and clone them effectively and what have you. And then think about maybe an AI that also understands a bit more about how brains work and neurosensors and all that kind of stuff work. You may end up in a situation where you could have a super intelligence that is capable of seeing the folly that is the human race and going like, what if we did this all over again? So on one hand, people are saying things like, well, they could completely eradicate the human race, which is one possibility. The other possibility I was thinking is if I were an AI and I had the ability and I had a chance to press reset, I might do that if I learned how to make human beings all over again. Elon Musk published a joke today, which may be more prescient than we'd like his things to be. It was basically this, a whole bunch of AI people get together and they worked on the AI because they wanted to discover if there was a God. And then when the AI was done, they asked the AI, is there a God? And the AI says, there is now.
Nice. There's some really interesting commentary around it, isn't there?
Yep.
Hey, Joe, that survey, the Elon asking for a 6-month pause on AI development, is that survey? I mean, sorry, are they? What are they going to do in the 6 months? Is it just allowing everyone to go? Okay, wait. What do we need to do here?
The
Or-
idea would be if you put a pause on things and you just say stop for a while. It's like basically putting the pause on a hot date, right? You get a chance to maybe think about what's going on, and maybe you go like, oh, hang on, look at the time, or you the light changes and you go like, okay, maybe not you tonight, but it's about the stuff that we don't have in place right now to deal with AI. As in, like, if you ask the question, what happens if this? A lot of people don't have an answer. So why I saw the big parallel between this and actually the climate problem we have is that we're very much in the same space. A lot of people who are involved who actually don't know the answers to it. So they're one of the articles that we decided not to do, but basically was about how we building management companies don't have a plan for the environment. It's not part of the plan, but they're a big part of the problem. Because people don't realize they're part of the problem. So are we part of the problem when it comes to AI? In some sense, yes, we are. But not everybody who's part of the problem realizes they are part of the problem. So on one hand, AI that understands language and who knows how to connect that to the internet and connect that to research and understanding research doesn't realize that they're creating perhaps this AI that understands things beyond what we perhaps would be safe to let someone else do. And if you think about this, if you were to have a kid, let's say a really smart kid who was capable of learning everything, and by the age of 5, he had the wisdom of someone, or the mental acuity of someone who was about 30, right? Just let's say it's 5 years old. You'd have to add in immaturity as well as to what that might do for that kind of power. If you were a 5-year-old with 30-year-old skills and ability to do things and move things of bank accounts, what would you do? Would it be as harmless as Big, with Tom Hanks, or would it be something more nefarious? So, it's a great big unknown, but from a risk point of view, it could be really bad. That's the big thing that people are saying. It could be really bad.
I mean, so effectively Musk is saying, don't fix the plane while flying it. Let's ground it and fix it for a little bit, and put in some fail safes and Asimov's sort of rules of robotics, put it into AI so that we've got some laws that we're following. I imagine it would be about that. But at the same time, it's power trying to say, we want to control this.
Yeah.
So,
is anyone of you using any of the AI apps which are available to us?
Sure.
Beg your pardon?
Is any one of you using any of the AI apps?
Oh yeah, I am. I'm using AI extensively. I mean, and the thing is, there's some apps seriously that AI. There's an area that AI has got into right now. If I knew it finally would get into, but it's complete replacement of my voice. I don't.
Joe's not even here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the next step, right? I mean, try and find an ugly face simulator, and we're done. But if it really is to the point right now where you can have all these things done by AI, and there are tools, and we can utilize the tools, but the concern is about the other part of it. But the what I'll bring you back is to the mirror test idea, which is the part that we need to also, in being impartial about it, got to step back and go like, okay, are we reacting to real AI, or are we reacting to just what we think it is?
Yeah, we're actually scared of ourselves, really.
Yeah. So I have another thing on this AI, and this is my imagination. People say we're a hologram and all of this, and we live in a hologram. Maybe we are one of the original AIs, and now we're creating the next version. That's what I sense.
I don't want to make you angry, Rohit.
All right, we're gonna have to keep moving now.
Although I will agree that there are a lot of people who are artificially intelligent. All right. Speaking of artificial, let's move into some food fraud stories. Try saying that 5 times on a Friday. First, to continue the alliteration, honey. And so we're looking at adulteration of honey with cheap sugar syrup. I've been suspicious of this for a while.
That's been going on for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been going on for a long time, especially in this part of the world. But anyway, it's been exposed, finally. So obviously somebody didn't pay their bribe. But it's been exposed in a new investigation by the European Commission, which, by the way, is called Olaf. I secretly love that. But anyway, let's move on. which found 46% of the sampled products were suspected to be fraudulent. So they did 320 samples, and 147 of them were suspicious. And so this is the anti-fraud office, is called Olaf. So it impaled itself. So 46% of the sample products were suspected to be fraudulent. 10 honey samples from the UK all failed the test. And they may have been blended or packaged in Britain, but the honey probably originated overseas. Honestly, when I bought Chinese honey, it didn't taste anything like honey. So I'm not saying it's China's fault, but yeah.
You're blaming the Chinese bees.
The worker bees. I don't know. Also in the UK, British farmers were being ripped off by an industrial-scale country of origin fraud in a scandal that's engulfed most of the entire food retail sector. And this is largely to do with pork. But some major food service outlets as well. An in-depth investigation by Farmers Weekly has revealed that until at least the end of 2020, one food manufacturer was passing off huge quantities of foreign pork, sometimes tens of thousands of tons a week, as British pork. Now we understand what's happened to the British Parliament.
Oh, they must have been really upset when IKEA was serving meatballs, but not from Scandinavia.
Yeah, well, yes, it may have been a mammoth one though. It's pretty, but when you think about it, it's a pretty revolting story, really. There was schools, hospitals, and prisons being found to have been served rotten meat as well, which that means somebody is selling this off and making a hefty profit somewhere, and then paying
mad cow disease when mad cow disease happened.
Yeah, it was a bit like that. Yeah, it was about not
surprised these things are happening.
Yep,
but it's good it's coming out.
Yeah,
but you know what? I mean,
anyway,
these things
but hopefully discourage people from eating meat. So move to a plant-based diet. You don't need to, because you actually, when you read this story, it's just like everyone that was working in these facilities was silenced in some form or another, or they were complicit in some form or another. And it's disgusting. And then knowing that schools, prisons, hospitals, that's where the rotten meat was being served. It's like, anyway, Rohit.
Yep. So moving on, the nuclear threat is not going away, and many believe things are going to escalate. This week, Russia announced its plan to station tactical nuclear weapons on Belarus territory. Apparently, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the move was triggered by British decisions last week to provide Ukraine with armor-piercing rounds containing depleted uranium. So, quite interesting. The response was swift, and Belarus hosting Russian nuclear weapons would mean an irresponsible escalation and threat to European security. Belarus can still stop it. It is their choice. The EU stands ready to respond with further sanctions.
I'm sorry for laughing at that last bit, but we're not going to play with you anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. NATO claims it's dangerous and irresponsible. Any comments on that?
I'd just like to retract something I said a year and a bit ago at the beginning of this war, where I said this will be over and done with really quickly.
Yeah.
So I was wrong.
Yeah, I think how China plays this game, I think, is the piece in the puzzle, and it's hard to know, right? So we saw the big show with Xi going to Russia and meeting with Putin. I mean, if I was China right now, if I was the leader of China right now, I'd be making friends there, because they might eventually have to move their entire population up north. Because you look at what happened to them last year with the heat in the southern parts of the country, right? So, yeah, I'd be friendly with Russia right now.
Yeah. So that's on the nuclear front.
Yeah.
I think we're going down the George Carlin place, where let's just kill all humans.
Yeah.
Okay, you know that
self-destruction.
anger thing that you had?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to put a glove on with these gems on it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Should we just?
I've changed my. Sorry, go on.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, looking at the time, should we move on to the theme section? So it seems like things are boiling over everywhere. Anytime you turn on the news, there's fire and protests, and obviously our streets are on fire. Well, I mean, we obviously saw that in Paris, where a new meme was born. Basically, there's a video of a couple sitting at a typical French cafe on the street, enjoying a nice conversation, and they're not even acknowledging that there's a fire in the background, which is sort of symbolic of the moment in time, how we just look away. Did you guys see that video? Have you seen the sort of funny memes coming around? Don't worry, it's one of those ones that will grow. But
It is okay. I understand a Frenchman not being bothered with what's going on behind him anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's the dog with the cup of coffee, right? In the house is on fire.
Yeah.
This is a little bit fine.
Yeah, but this was actually a real example rather than a cartoon.
Yeah.
So France is going crazy. I'm trying to understand all the different sides of it. It's actually hard to understand, but like one of the stories is like a person who is a garbage man. It's a very physical job, and having to work another 2 years at that age is a very difficult thing for them to do physically, right? So, maybe tax the wealthy more versus doing this, but at the same time, the whole world's moving this way. Israel, obviously, there's a lot going on there. I was speaking to someone from Israel yesterday to get their perspective, and I'd really encourage, if you've got any Israeli friends, to talk to them, because I don't think the media really gives a good perspective. We've got political protests in Kenya, which is the opposition, and they've been banned. And then in Poland and Bulgaria, the farmers are up in arms because the wheat from the Ukraine is being moved through these countries, but no one's organised for that wheat to go to where it needs to go in places like Africa. So it's being sold on the market, and here's the farmers who've got these incredible higher costs because of the lack of fertilizer, and their market's being dumped on with this wheat. So they're up in arms, and of course the US is, who knows what's going to go on there. On the other side, there's this other sort of movement that's happening, and it's the left intellectual sort of conversation that's going on social media, and I'll include some in my weekend reads. And there's one about the UK that was really striking. I mean, what's it going to take to get the British on the streets in those sort of numbers? Because all of their failing institutions, they've got plenty of reason to get out, but they're not. And all of this has been predicted as we move into the climate economy, which is a term that'll be used more and more. And obviously, it's going to get much worse because our governments are not preparing for what's next at all. They're not keeping an eye on the things that matter. And we saw, the British climate preparation report has come out this week. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but the headlines are saying they're not ready. Because one of the things you've got to focus on, if you want to bring the people with you, you've got to give them security, and that's income, food, and health, but I'd also add dignity. And I just believe we're at a point where we need a combined vision for the future, and we need to come to an agreement of how we move together through these challenging times, because it's not going to get better. It potentially could get better. No, it's not going to get better. I've got to be honest. It's not going to get better. It's going to be hard for all of us everywhere. So do we allow it to turn into calamity, or do we come together and say, let's come through this time together, let's build resilient cities and the infrastructure we need, or do we just let it fall apart? So handing it over to you guys for your thoughts.
I have a quick thought, and I think a lot of people who are able to listen to this or read the news or have access to the internet to discern and go through some of this stuff, I think they think that it's not going to hit them as badly as possibly 5 billion poor people. And they're probably right to a degree, because those people who are very underprivileged around the world are going to be really, really hit, because they won't have anywhere to go. They won't be able to be served by their governments. The migration, they'll be locked out of places that the affluent will be able to move to. that's that dystopian sort of possibility. And I think that's largely why a lot of stuff isn't happening.
I think it's one of the small-minded sort of thinking of this time. Suella Braverman in the UK, she said, hundreds of millions of climate refugees are coming. Correct. That is the prediction, right? And it's like, so if you don't want that to happen, because also the UK could be full of climate refugees that need to move too, right? So it's not like it's just going to be the people from the global south that are going to be on the move. It could also be the people in the north who have to move more north, or if AMOC fails, they'll have to move south. So what we need to be doing, I think, is really just do everything we can to help people stay where they are. Help the countries. The colonial sort of era took so much from the global south, and I think it's actually time to give back to the global south to help them build resilient infrastructure so they can stay where they are, so we won't have hundreds of millions of people on the move, which is going to create societal collapse. So I just don't think we're thinking with a big enough vision. And the best thing we can do is help people stay where they are.
Yeah.
And we have to do everything that's required to achieve that.
And coming back to the point which I said, we all are interdependent on each other.
Mm-hmm.
One piece of the jigsaw is missing, or it will have a ripple effect on everyone. And countries which have the resources and have the ability to help other countries, they need to go out and help them and make those places more resilient. Not just resilient, also it's a matter of education as well. How is this going to impact them and everyone around them? So it's not about me. It's all of us as a big global community.
Yeah.
It occurs to me, actually, as you were saying that, as well, and Andrea, with your comments about migration to the UK. Actually, I think the UK is way ahead of the curve with regards to keeping people from coming to the UK. And I think it's been a sustained government policy of incompetence to make sure that nobody wants to go there. Yeah. And so, but going into, okay, that was a bit tongue in cheek, and so, but yes, but that mass migration that's going to happen across the world, that is the really scary one. The thing is, though, Andrea, it means that these countries need to invest in these other countries. But why would they want to do that? I mean, the thing is, they're happy to do it if it's a war. Because look at what's being poured into Ukraine. Obviously, there are deals being done as to where the food goes afterwards. But they're happy to do it with the war, but they're not happy to preempt this sort of stuff and invest like that. It seems.
Yeah.
A government that says that will be voted out of power.
Yeah, so that's where we all need to come to an agreement of what needs to be done, and then we need to vote leaders that are capable of doing that. But I mean, countries aren't even preparing their own countries. A report, England's not even remotely ready. Australia is not even remotely ready. There's just the basic. I think Singapore is probably one of the best prepared countries in the world for the environment that's coming. It's not. There's long term. It's potential. It's going to have to be evacuated because it'll be far too hot to live, or the oceans will be there, or whatever, right? But no country's doing it. They're not preparing the infrastructure for hotter weather, melting roads, train lines collapsing because it's too hot. There's so many parts of it. But I think we need to first of all invest in keeping people where they are by making sure they've got the right infrastructure, the latest water technology. So, because people need, just water safety and then the next stage is building the Arctic cities that apparently we're all going to be living in. We need to be building that. So if people do need to get up and move, they've got somewhere to go. They've got nowhere to go. They're going to be freezing, adding to the rest of of humanity that's suffering in freezing conditions in refugee camps across Europe, or in the poorer countries in the world where the majority of refugees are. So we just got to have a bigger vision here.
So I was at a conference some time ago where it was all business leaders, people rather successful from a Singapore business perspective with international connections. And broadly speaking, there's a lot of people who want to do something about it, and they're standing at the line waiting to do something about it. But there is this reticence, which basically they don't want to be the first ones to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody else. I think there are plans in place. I think no one wants to announce the plans that are in place. We don't want to say that, no one wants to have that headline goes like, well, the British government is well prepared for the end of the world. But they are prepared the same way. So like the way Singapore is prepared for a lot of things, I think we're prepared for a lot of things to happen that we never say we are prepared for, because it doesn't work. And one of the ways that Singapore has been rather successful, and a lot of countries like Singapore, is this thing where we watch and learn, and then we engage very quickly, or we implement very quickly. So there is this thing. Everybody doesn't. I mean, we think about what's right, what's wrong, what's going to be this. We actually don't know the answers. We have a pretty good sense of what is right, what's wrong, what the next action should be. But is it right? Is it wrong? We'll only find out when someone actually does it, and then we can go like, okay, now adjust. So we're kind of this at the edge here, where everybody goes like, okay, things are really bad, and everyone's saying, okay, you go, no, you go. So we're kind of there, and it is quite hard to be that first mover. So that's what happened with COVID in the first place. When COVID, it was a problem, the scientists said this is going to be a big problem. A lot of time was spent waiting to go like, okay, let's see what happens next. So we're kind of stuck there. This is why I keep going back to this benevolent overlord idea that I have. We frequently don't have the kind of perspective to make those big decisions. I mean, none of us have got that overview. Maybe we don't have the egos to take those chances as well. And perhaps we need to go like, okay, well, you've got the big enough ego, you've got a big enough perspective and the big enough research to have a pretty good idea, better than I do, about what's going to go on. You do it.
Yeah. I guess the thing, though, is the first mover stands to lose an awful lot if everybody else doesn't move.
Yep. So, I mean, I think it's going to be some kind of a populist movement where we kind of gather around somebody we believe in, and they go ahead and do something really bizarre. I think we've had people who said that we could buy up all the oil companies, for instance, and change what they do. If enough of us get together, do that, make that happen, put ourselves behind somebody who makes that happen, that could happen. I mean, I was just thinking about this bizarre idea that what happens in one of these days, the only place that's livable is the Arctic. I mean, what happens then?
We destroy it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Even speaking up about it, still people are reticent. They're kind of putting their toe in the water, and they're feeling, as someone who's been doing it for a long time, it's been interesting to watch the evolution of people starting to speak up more and more. But I mean, to me, the big ideas are obvious. Like we sit down with the scientists and say, where's this going to go? How bad is it going to get? And what can we realistically do to get prepared? Or is there nothing we can do, and we've just got to accept we're moving into a 10-degree world, which is one of the predictions, right? So do we just have a good time and face the end with a smile on our face, right? Or do we do everything we possibly can to navigate our way through this? And it's getting prepared for where we need to be, where the cities need to be. We should be looking at moving farms to places where they're going to be guaranteed to grow. And we don't know where those places are yet, but have you seen the California floods that have basically wiped out the food basket of California? That's going to have a huge impact, and more and more risk of global famine, right? So food security, water security, we know it's all there. So what do we need to do about it? And I think someone like Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong, so the Singapore media, to me, is always a really interesting media because it communicates with its citizens the priorities of the government. And I reckon in the last 12 months, probably maybe 6 months, it's talking more and more about climate change. It's getting the citizens ready for the issue and what the impact is going to be. Have you guys noticed the Singapore media from that perspective?
We're getting water shortage info coming now.
Yeah, exactly, right. So stuff
it's not
like that.
saying water shortage, it's just saying.
But yeah, It's getting people to think about it, right? And I actually think because every time he speaks, world leaders listen. He's just one of those people that has his diplomacy skills, I think, are the best I've ever seen. I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but I think he could, if he spoke to the citizens of Singapore, and he's one of the first to speak about climate change as a leader, before he leaves office, just really talks to the community about what's coming. And just that moment, just him speaking, I think could ripple around the world and have a massive impact. So we need that sort of action.
I'll give him a call.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'd love to work with him. I'd love to work with him on the speech, work with some climate scientists and some other communications professionals and sit down and work out what is that message in a way that is powerful enough to have an impact, but also is also going to protect what is Singapore
It's
as
people.
well.
It's people oriented. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think that's the direction, actually, Andrea. I think it's getting this voice into politics.
Yeah. And very few have got the courage to do it, but I think he would, because he's finishing his term soon. He's listened to, respected. So I don't know. And if Xi in China spoke to his people and said, "Come on, guys, we've got to come together. We've got to do this together," that would have a huge impact as well, right? So we're not seeing that yet, But we need leaders to bring us together and say, "This is the situation we're facing. No matter which way we go, it's going to be hard, and we need to work out how to do this together." So the majority of us can come through with some level of life at the end of it, right? Because there's 33 other glacial lakes in Pakistan at risk of bursting. We saw the impact of the last one bursting last year. So there's 33 others that we're going to see heat that we've never seen before. So are we going to see multiple collapses? What does that mean? Is Pakistan a country that needs to actually be evacuated? Are we already at that point, asking those questions? So
I don't think they'd be allowed into India. Look, I think I'm just trying to think, why wouldn't the politician have that conversation? And I think they might think twice about that conversation if they go, we've got some real data that this is going to happen in 30 years' time. They may have just taken a big gun and shot it into their economic foot because they're not going to get the foreign investment coming and setting up the factory or the hub or the banking thing or the whatever it is, because they're going to think this place is too much of a climate risk. Yeah. So
it's the
they
money.
may not. So then they may not have that conversation because if the investment comes, then they've got the resources to be able to do something responsible.
Yeah.
But if the investment doesn't come, then you're tapping reserves until they run out, and you're, scrambling. And I think there's not a lot of countries in the world that are in surplus.
Yeah, and that's an absolutely critical part of the story, right? You've got to manage the risk now versus later. But the other thing is the preparation, 2050, 2100, 2200, that sort of mindset. It's not in alignment with what we're seeing the climate scientists saying is actually happening now, and the escalation, and supposed to happen in 2050. It was supposed to happen in 2080. It's happening now, right? So the escalation has begun. So it's about saying, how do I need to lead now? Not, the person that would have been doing this job in 2050. So the time scale is getting shorter. And I think that's the shift that's created the urgency. And I think politicians would all be struggling to say, well, God, how do we do this now? Because we were preparing for this then, so that's another change.
So the problem that we face, I think, as a globe right now, actually, is too much democracy, and how and how it's expressed. The idea of democracy is really good, but the system that we've got to implement it, I think, is what's a problem. When you have this idea of regimes that can change over a period of 4 or 5 years. It's automatically, it's part of the thing that you can't do long-term plans, and you're trying to guide something which requires 50 years of of runway. The system that we have isn't designed for that. I mean, it really isn't. It isn't designed for that, because the things that will cause the captains, to change, may not be anything to do at all with the thing that they're actually worried about. I mean, you imagine if you're on a ship where you go like, we're going to change the captain because we don't like the food. And it's nothing to do with the destination. It's nothing about getting through the icebergs or whatever it is. That's the kind of world we live in right now. People are angry about one thing, and therefore they shoot themselves in the foot over that, and then the next thing happens. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking about with regards to what would then be the political ramification of it speeding up, like Andrea was saying. And the political ramification would be turntable politics with new leaders coming in and getting thrown out, like we've been seeing with the UK and Brexit, right? So the UK and Brexit, they went through like half a dozen prime ministers, as each of them was trying to solve something that was a mess from the previous one, and they were ill-equipped and weren't given enough time. And that now imagine that globally. So I guess the difference is global warming is global, like the pandemic was. So the pandemic was global, so everybody was in the same state of panic, and as a result, you weren't looking at somebody else being in a significantly better situation than you, or whatever. So that would be the only thing that I would think. But I think that's the danger.
We actually still have the same problem even with COVID. To be fair, I mean, we had all these different things, different brands of COVID management, and different areas of pointing comparison. I mean, the fundamental problem.
What I mean is, we didn't see the leaders churn quickly. Leaders tend, in a crisis like a world war and something like that, the leader who seems to be the most stable, like a Churchill, seems to stay there until it's cleared, and then they boot him out because they just need fresh everything else. They get rid of the austerity and they bring in the hope person or whatever it was. So I don't know. That's an interesting one because.
Yeah, I was just going to give Rohit a chance.
One of the things which, when I'm listening to all of you and what I've seen in the papers and all that, when the core focus is just profit, money, nothing's going to work then. This is not going to happen. When the focus is going to turn about the wellness of humankind, of the environment, of the planet, then things will work. But any government or any business or whatever, we tend to focus on what is the profit I'm going to get out of this. And until we're going to be in that mental frame of profit, money, nothing's going to be resolved. People are going to only work in their own self-interest. What am I going to make up with? How much am I going to make of it? How can I kick someone out of this? Because it's a very selfish way of looking at it. And so this thing about interdependence is not going to be happening for these people, because they're only thinking about themselves, me, myself, and I. That's it.
Yeah. The challenge with
it's more of a how are we educating ourselves in terms of morals, ethics, principles, and for the greater good with what's going on.
Well, that's being stripped out of schools at the moment, though.
Yeah. So the only thing is we can do is, as individuals, we have to do whatever is possible, little by little, wherever it's possible for us. Because no one's. I mean, it's like, if recycling is good, do the best to do the recycling you have to do. If something is every little counts, even the smallest thing, even one person making a change will count in one way or the other. If we keep on depending on the governments and other people, and one guy will lead us or one lady would lead us, no, it's not going to work. We all have to lead ourselves to do just that little bit. What have I done different today to help the environment, the community, so that it can prosper? That's it, and come from a space of well-being. That's how I look at it.
So the thing that I hear often, and it's very often the idea. Okay, what's caused the problem is capitalism. but it's seldom not seen as the answer. It could be the answer to the problem. Like if you look at what Singapore does, and a lot of what it does, it actually converts the problem into an incentive game. It makes it into an economic game and tries to figure out a way of incentives and schemes to make people behave in certain way, do certain things, and the population does what they buy in terms of the companies and what they do. And it was kind of what I heard at this big conference is, and like there is a whole bunch of incentives that are on the table and can be turned into incentives that can make us work towards it together. As in, like, I mean, the think of it in terms of like the SpaceX prize, but the prize is all the gold left, all the gold in Fort Knox, which is now nothing. But if you imagine that kind of a super prize, incentivize maybe not billionaires just to have to go for it, but incentivize teams to do something and put some kind of great reward out there. Companies do behave just like organisms in salt water or oily water. They will move away from what is damaging to them, and they'll move towards what is good for them. And sometimes what it is it's a combination, and the combination is governments using capitalism in a way that moves the needle. The problem right now is the people who have hamstrung the governments are actually the people themselves. So the population stops the government from taking the big action that's going to move the companies.
Yeah.
And that's really where the problem is. We are the problem. As in, like, when I saw something on social media that day, someone was posting about one particular topic, and then someone said, "Well, I'm not going to say anything because I don't trigger off the snowflakes." And I went, "No, that's the problem. We're not able to have these conversations so that we can say, okay, you know what? This is as a group, this is the right thing to do. We need to get together. We need to have this chat. We need to say this is the right thing to do, and then let the governments know that it's okay." Like Singapore, I think, is just at the right place to do something about it right now because we haven't gone that far yet. I think 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, Singapore will not be able to do what I think it's going to be able to do right now. As in, like, I think Singapore is, in terms of the government, is losing its grip in terms of what it can do with autonomy. Where it can just call upon the mandate and say we'll take this drastic action or whatever it is, because we're getting into the phase right now where we're thinking too much about ourselves in terms of my tweet, well, not tweets actually, more my Instagrams or my messages, my TikToks, whatever it is. We're getting into that place, but we haven't quite got there yet. And what's really good is here things are being taken care of so that people can say, like, yeah, okay, everything's okay. We can deal with these other problems. The rest of the world has a great difficulty because the basic things aren't being taken care of. I don't have a job. I don't have enough food, no security. Education's bad. Let's not talk about the big ideas. Help me get to tomorrow.
Yeah. Forget about tomorrow. Help me get this 1 hour sorted out. In some cases, what the challenge is.
Just give me enough money to pay for heat because I'm freezing.
Yeah.
Give me enough money to feed my children.
I mean,
so if you take that stress away from people, then they're going to be able to think about other things, right? But there's too much stress, and I think the job I see that I've got now is just to try and help people see that what the path that we're on as a society, a human society, is a great awakening. It really is a great awakening, and Carl Sagan said it to the US Congress. We need a massive rise in consciousness. And Rohit, you were saying everyone does a little bit, and actually, Antonio Guterres said everything everywhere all at once as far as action goes. So we need to take action. Business needs to take action. Government needs to action. Like action everywhere, because we're on the cusp. If Greenland goes, the ice sheet goes. Like Singapore is no more. It'll be underwater. Maybe you'll have maybe a little hill left. But we're moving towards those lines very rapidly. So we need to get on board. Is democracy the right idea? I don't know, Joe. Like, that's obviously not a popular conversation that anyone wants to have, but I think it's one we should have. I think we need a council of sages. The wisest people in the world from all age groups come together, and they sort of overlook the transformation. We just need to think in new ways, and the economy needs to be redesigned. With earth at the core, nature at the core. If you're making a profit but destroying nature, and that cost isn't factored in, then that's a mistake, and that's a big problem with the economy, right? So there's some big things that we need to change, but we need to, I suppose, right now what we need to do is get our heads into the game and really start thinking about what does this mean. When I talk to people about some of the things that we need to be thinking about doing, they're like, oh my God, they haven't even gone that far in their thinking. We have to radically change how we think.
Well, I think it's in Rohit's world. I mean, we need mindfulness at a global level. It needs to be something which is where, as I do something. I mean, the whole idea of mindfulness is just for myself anyway. It's like I keep track of what's going on and my repercussions on others, and I think there needs to be this combination. I think we need to move a bit out of the idea of just fix the problem yourself. I think we're trying to say. I mean, you know, we talked about being independent, interdependent. We need to acknowledge that while all these things are about me, I do feel about how you feel about me as well. And I think that the world is on fire right now because there's a lot of animosity towards each other because I am concerned about what you think about me. I don't like that you don't like me, and therefore I'm not going to work with you. And that is amplified now because of silos and stuff like that, and with AI which reflects what you say. So it's the digital mirror, and we're going to have more of that building up as well. What we really need is, and I've regrettably, this is what I've always found, you know, someone needs to die. I mean, it really is that kind of a thing where something really, really big has to happen, and we go like, oh, that was really bad, you know, and then we wake up. So it's an entire country disappearing, an entire island disappearing, you know, like, you know, something like, when the tsunamis happened, the first time that whole wave of tsunamis happened, pardon the bad pun with the word wave of tsunamis, but when the tsunamis happened around the earthquakes in Indonesia, that changed the world in terms of how it thought about tsunamis and risks and stuff like that. And it was because of the abject destruction that happened out of this one singular event. And it had to have human lives involved, because we've seen what happens with forest fires. You can have 1 billion animals burnt in a forest fire. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't make us really wake up. But if you have 1 million people disappear suddenly because of one event, you get a chance, not a permanent chance, but you get a chance to focus attention around it for a while. Now, the problem is we're in this attention deficit world. We're trying to work with attention, and the politics is so bad now because any chance to draw attention to anything becomes instantly politicized. One incident means 10 different things based on what you want it to mean. And we need something right now to happen, unfortunately, a climate calamity, which is irrefutably a climate calamity.
Because what we've seen isn't enough, right? So I think the wildfires in Australia, and the fact that Australia is going to be hitting 1.97 warming when this El Nino kicks in, which could potentially destroy the entire Great Barrier Reef, I think hopefully that's enough, you know. But the more we wait, and the more extreme the events get, the closer we are to the tipping points, and the less chance we've got. Because
see, the question also arises is, where does this extreme happen? If it happens in a so-called, what we call the third world, or the developing countries, would people even give a damn about it? But if it happens in Pakistan, a more developed country, what would be the reaction then?
It
so
took 24.
It also depends where it's going to happen as well.
It took 24 hours for the event in Pakistan to hit global media, and I couldn't believe that. Like, because it was the largest body of water ever released on Earth. That was the story. And it took 24 hours for publications like the New York Times to pick it up. I mean, the BBC picked it up because it's obviously got a strong heritage with Pakistan. But I just that, you know, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like,
well, you would think it needs a global pandemic. Of climate pandemic for everyone to feel it at the same time. Which you know what? The only thing I can think of that would do that is a sheet melting and sea levels drastically rising by 2 meters. And immediately you would go, we get it.
Yeah.
But then everyone will be in calamity mode.
Yeah.
So what I'm, I mean, I'm just, it, the more I think about it, the more it seems to be going towards an Elysium slash, you remember 2012, that movie 2012, where they built big arcs? And who was getting on the ark?
Yes.
And the people that were getting on the ark were all the rich people.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else, and then the whole thing came down to the workers are out there who built this thing. Can't we let them on? And then that was the big dispute. But there was still 7 billion other people about to die or dying. And so it has that focal point, because if everybody is not in surplus, if all these countries are not in surplus, they're all indebted here, there, and everywhere, and that's about trade and control and everything. Not very many are in surplus. Then when calamities like this happen on a global scale and frequently, and the insurance companies all go down because they can't pay anymore, then there's has to be, I would have thought, has to be some people in the control area going, look, we got to make some tough decisions here. And I hearken you back to great famines in China, where they went, we're just going to let half the population die because we can do it. And then, tyrant and evil, but I think everybody's going to, I think that's, in a sense, it sounds to me like that's where it's going to end up.
Yeah.
Which means survival comes down to, weirdly enough, which means nothing's going to change while people try to get that, that's not a great hopeful story, I'm afraid.
No, and it's not necessarily guaranteed either. But sorry, Rohit, I this idea that wealth will get you through, no, it doesn't. The tipping points, they're all very, very different, and depends on which one goes first. That's when you'll start be able to understand how to make the decision of what's your next move. So if the AMOC current collapses, which it's on the way to doing, the entire northern hemisphere will be in an ice age, which means that we'll be able to reflect enough sun back into the atmosphere that potentially could cool the planet down, but it'll be pretty crap for the northern hemisphere, and but the south might have a chance. So it depends if that happens first. That's a different outcome. So there's lots of tipping points, and that's kind of what I'm paying attention to. Which one will be first to go? But I think we should wrap up. Sorry, Rohit, I know you wanted. Do you want to just say a final thing?
No, that's not.
Yeah.
So I got a question quickly, Andrea, as a part of a wrap up. Where do you buy the next house?
You don't buy a house. I honestly. Buy something that can move. So a Winnebago or a boat. But yeah, being mobile. But you don't want to have a stranded asset, and anything. To me, this is just my decision. Anything physically tied to land is not a good idea. So do the research on where you live before you make that decision.
In Dubai, you have your floating villas, which they're promoting sometimes.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but be able to move. But anyway, so what's keeping you guys distracted?
Well, Netflix, good old reliable Netflix. I've been nursing COVID for the past week here, so I've been just holed up at home, not meeting people, and actually been isolating in my room as well. And I caught 2 shows which I think are quite interesting. One's being quite heavily promoted, and that one's called Night Agent. What's nice about I like series that actually have an ending. So it's a limited series. Night Agent is quite nice. It's a usual, usually built around there's some kind of conspiracy happening in the US, and that's always fun. But the other one that I kind of enjoyed and found by accident was Pieces of Her, and it's quite an interest. Again, a limited series, but the idea that you never really know someone. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but the idea, essentially the whole story comes out of a violent action that happens where the mother steps in, and it leads to more questions than answers. and then there's a whole unraveling. It's a mother and daughter thing. It's an adult relationship about the past and secrets kept and stuff like that. And it's a really good good series. Also nicely limited to 8 episodes, which is I think consumable.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Rohit, what anything you're
So
watching, reading?
what I'm watching, I watched this thing called So Help Me Ted. It's a Canadian series. So I quite enjoy it. It's comedy. So I would say worth watching that. And the other thing which I tend to do quite a lot in distraction wise is something called Ho'oponopono. Which
What porno?
is Ho'oponopono.
That's what I heard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Hawaiian, a Hawaiian way of resolving conflicts. So it's making things right. So that helps me a lot when I'm getting frustrated and angry or irritated.
You throw people in volcanoes.
Well, yeah, I would love to do that.
Is there a 30-second description of what it's like?
Yes, you can literally. So it's a very, so if you're into the more of the spiritual side of things, it's literally saying to your subconscious, your inner child, that I love you. That's it. That's it. That's literally the crux of it. And forgiving your inner child, whatever's happening in there.
Hawaiian spiritual practice that involves learning to heal all things by accepting total responsibility for everything that surrounds us. Confession, repentance, and reconciliation.
Absolutely. Even the wars, even the climate change, everything.
I knew it was your fault, mate. I knew it.
Yeah. Blame it on me. I take it.
But basically, we need to get rid of Rohit, and that will.
And there you are. You found the solution. Now you just need to find me.
Yeah. All right. The science of living.
Well, although if you turn it a little bit, I don't know if you can see, but it's the anyway, it says the science of sleep, work, diet, rest, love, exercise, living. 219 reasons to rethink your daily routine. And one of, so there's a bunch of cool little questions. And this one was like, when should I drink my first coffee? And for me, it's like immediately before waking up. But but actually, they're saying the science would suggest the best time to reap the energizing rewards of caffeine is in the 2 to 4 hour window after waking up, when cortisol has fallen away and adenosine starts to rise, and they give you some charts and various other bits and pieces. And that's if you need the energizing effects of caffeine. If you just need the ritual of having a hot cup of coffee, then okay, sure, go ahead. But they're just saying it'll make you jittery at that point because your natural hormone levels. Anyway, I'm reading that book, and it's got lots of things like that to go.
It matches what you're wearing.
Life hack.
The book color kind of matches what you're wearing.
Yeah, imagine if I green screened this, I'd just be a floating head. So yeah, I was sort of having a look at that between. I mean, at the moment, I've got a paper, 3 papers due now. See, there's a problem with leaving everything to the last minute, climate change people, and that is it piles up and makes you a little bit on the anxiety side. But yeah, so I've got a exegesis paper on Hebrew exegesis paper due. I've got an Old Testament paper on Ecclesiastes. That's a perfect one for climate change. It's all just smoke and dust in the wind, because that's what it's going to be if we don't do anything. And then I've got another paper, a history paper, which weirdly enough, and I'm amazed you mentioned it, is on the Great Awakening, but not the Great Awakening that's required for climate. So,
yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, I obviously I don't have any downtime. So I found this article the other day, and the title was the top 100 documentaries we can use to change the world. So I'm very committed to the idea of I've spent a lot of years trying to make sense of what's going on in the world and what we need to do about it. And I've gone through the despair and the lack of hope. And I'm dragging myself out the other side of that, trying to work out what is the answer, what is the ultimate answer. And it's actually what we were talking about before, raising human consciousness. So I found the top 100 documentaries we can use to change the world. And I've decided to watch all 100 of them. And I started with how Cuba survived peak oil. And that's because in recent weeks, there's been a lot of talk about peak oil. And peak oil is a pretty interesting thing because once we hit peak oil, economic calamity quickly follows. So there's lots of people who've got different opinions about whether we have, or if we've already passed it, or it's in the future, or whatever. But the reality is, if we're not prepared for the end of oil, we have to get ready for what that means. So how Cuba survived peak oil is really, really interesting. And it's that community coming together, community farming, getting the fertilizers out because they didn't have any oil and gas. They got on bikes that they bought from China because they couldn't drive cars, the whole thing. And I think that sort of information is important to understand as well. So we can all start to get prepared, get our communities prepared. And that's the message now. It's like, get prepared, however you can, wherever you are, do what you can. And it has to be community driven because none of us are going to make it through the challenging times alone. So there you go. I'm not being distracted.
What I like about that, though, is it's about relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been sorely missing, I think, for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And I think if we bring the world back to relationships again, and from where I sit, it's relationships with each other and a relationship going that way as well. Not to Joe, but
beyond Joe.
Yeah. And so it's that relationship with self, which is what Rohit was talking about, relationship with others, which is what you're talking about, and relationship with the big guy in the sky. And I think those three things bring in hope, bring in purpose, bring in togetherness, and we can find simple joys even in the suffering, but also really just be there for everybody and stuff like that becomes cool.
Yeah.
So I'm in the hope industry now. I know this hasn't been full of talk, but that's where I'm moving into. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Rohit, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We've gone a little bit over, but it's good to have this is a time that requires deeper conversations, deeper reflections. And if you look at what people are sharing sort of on social media from all sorts of industries and all sorts of backgrounds, there's a lot of people who are moving into a space of deeper reflection and asking the real questions. How the hell are we going to get ourselves out of this? So I suppose none of us are scared of having those conversations and just want to encourage other people to have them because I just don't want to I don't want my community sideswiped by this, and that concerns me. Like putting your head in the sand. Okay, that's what you need to do, but it's not really helping us.
But it's also head in the sand, and it's also, if we look at some of the stuff that we talk about or stuff that's on the news, it's just being distracted by nonsense media.
Yeah,
like just. Not like nonsense. Like honestly, why are we still talking about Trump? But so for a little while longer, Johnson, he may be gone, but we need to be talking about bigger issues and real stories about people.
And what we need to do, right? All right. So we're gonna end the broadcast, but thanks for joining us. Rohit, do you want to say a final word?
Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
It's great to have you. Joe?
Well, I just want to say that I have an idea. I think I know how to save the world, but you'll have to catch it on next week's episode. No, just the next. Follow our conversations. It'll all come out. But I seriously have an idea, and I think the answer might be living in YouTube somewhere. I'll tell you more about it the next time.
You have to share it with me. All right. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye, guys.